Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren, you may also call me Lo, and today I'm bringing you another book haul. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you're doing well, and let's get on into it. There are another 30-something books here that I've acquired since my last book haul. So I'm definitely a little bit overdue for one, but hopefully this video isn't too long. My plan for this video is to first go through some books that I've already read and their sequels, then my book of the month books, then pre-orders, and then everything else. So to get us started, I hauled Empress of Salt and Fortune. I read this a few months ago and gave it 5 stars. I absolutely adored it and wanted to own a physical copy of it. Highly recommend this if you haven't checked it out yet. It's very, very short. And this book follows a cleric named Chi who travels to the palace of an exiled empress who no longer lives there to kind of find out about the history of this empress, to find out more about her. And there Chi meets an elderly woman named Rabbit, who was actually a handmaiden to said empress. And Rabbit starts to tell Chi her story as well as the empress's story, and we kind of see how Rabbit and the empress's stories collide. So it's a beautiful, beautiful book. It's written super well, and you'll see in this book haul, Niveau comes up time and time again because I absolutely love her writing. So going along with that, I also hauled When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, which is the sequel to Empress of Salt and Fortune. And I don't know a whole lot about it, except that it's the sequel. It says, the cleric Chi finds themselves and their companions at the mercy of a band of fierce tigers who ache with hunger. To stay alive until the mammoths can save them, Chi must unwind the intricate layered story of the tiger, Ho Thi Thao, and her scholar lover, a woman of courage, intelligence, and beauty, and discover how truth can survive becoming history. Niveau returns to the Empire of On and the Singing Hills cycle in this mesmerizing, lush standalone follow-up to the Empress of Salt and Fortune. So that's interesting. I guess this is a standalone. You could read these out of order. But I'm very excited to get to this one, and there's a third one in the series coming out, I believe, in the fall. Moving on to another book that I've already read, I hauled Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I absolutely loved this. This was another 5-star book for me. So I ended up also buying the sequel for this one. And Skyward follows our main character Spensa, who lives in a world that's constantly under attack by an alien species called the Krell. And on their planet, there are fighter pilots who are constantly kind of battling the Krell and trying to save their civilization. And Spensa dreams of becoming a fighter pilot. But her father was a fighter pilot who abandoned his crew during a very important battle and was labeled a coward. He was also killed during that battle, and Spensa and her family have been labeled kind of the family of a coward. And the flight school wants nothing to do with Spensa because they're afraid that she is a coward as well. I absolutely loved this. I love Brandon Sanderson. I've rated every book I've read by him so far 5 stars, so I wasn't really shocked that I absolutely fell in love with this. And like I said, I bought the sequel and I'm very, very excited to get to this one soon. I'm not gonna read the summary for this one because I was looking at it earlier and it basically just summarizes the first book, which I just did. I've heard sort of mixed things about this. I've seen a lot of 3-star reviews for it. Again, I haven't rated any Brandon Sanderson book less than 5 stars, so I have a lot of confidence, but I have seen kind of mixed ratings about this sequel. All right. Moving on to Book of the Month books. In May and June, I got one of the picks, obviously, and then I added on 2 books. So there are 6 Book of the Month books to go through. In May, my pick was Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. This book kind of stuck out to me as far as all the available picks for May because I've read a Nina LaCour book before, and that was Watch Over Me. I believe I gave that 3.5 stars, but this one sounds absolutely beautiful. I thought Nina LaCour's writing was amazing, and yeah, I'm just very, very excited to dive into this one. I also think the cover of this is just, it's beautiful. So this book follows Sarah Foster, who runs away from home at 16, leaving behind the girl she once was, capable of trust and intimacy. Years later in Los Angeles, she is a sought-after bartender renowned as much for her brilliant cocktails as for the mystery that clings to her. Across the city, Emily Dubois is in a holding pattern, yearning for the beauty and community her Creole grandparents cultivated but unable to commit. On a whim, she takes a job arranging flowers at the glamorous restaurant Yerba Buena and falls into an affair with the married owner. The morning Emily and Sarah first meet, their connection is immediate. But the damage both women carry and the choices they have made pulls them apart again and again. When Sarah's old life catches up to her, upending everything she thought she wanted, just as Emily has finally gained her own sense of purpose, they must decide if their love is more powerful than their pasts. I also just noticed that there's a cocktail and flowers on the cover, so that's really cute. And obviously, this is the one that stuck out to me the most out of all of those picks. And I still decided to look through the rest of the books, and I was really, really interested in The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, so I added this one on. This book is supposed to be like a gothic horror, kind of reminiscent of Mexican Gothic, and I think it's also compared to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I read. Haven't read Mexican Gothic yet, but I do own it. And I don't know, I've been kind of in the mood for like darker books lately, even though it's the middle of summer and my summer TBR is full of like romances and contemporaries, but in the fall I'm going to have an absolute ball. During the overthrow of the Mexican government, Beatrice's father was executed and her home destroyed. When handsome Don Rodolfo Solorzano proposes, Beatrice ignores the rumors surrounding his first wife's sudden demise, choosing instead to seize the security that his estate in the countryside provides. She will have her own home again, no matter the cost. But Hacienda San Isidro is not the sanctuary she imagined. When Rodolfo returns to work in the capital, visions and voices invade Beatrice's sleep. The weight of invisible eyes follows her every move. Rodolfo's sister, Juana, scoffs at Beatrice's fears. But why does she refuse to enter the house at night? Why does the cook burn copal incense at the edge of the kitchen and mark the doorway with strange symbols? What really happened to the first Doña Solorzano? Beatrice only knows two things for certain. Something is wrong with the hacienda, and no one there will save her. I mean, I couldn't not. The reviews from people who I guess have arcs of this were really, really good, so I'm very, very excited about this one as well. And then finally, I added on The Keeper of Night by Kylie Lee Baker. This book I've heard sort of mixed things about, but I've been very intrigued by it and do want to read it anyway. And this one is an older book of the month pick. I think it was from, it says November 2021. Wren Scarborough has been collecting souls in the London streets for centuries. Expected to obey the harsh hierarchy of the Reapers, who despise her due to her mysterious mother and often more mysterious Shinigami powers, Wren conceals her emotions and avoids her tormentors as best as she can. When her failure to control her developing Shinigami abilities drives Wren out of London, she flees to Japan in search of the acceptance she's never gotten from her fellow Reapers. Accompanied by her younger brother, the only being on Earth to care for her, Wren enters Yomi, the Japanese underworld, to serve the goddess of death, only to learn that there, too, she must prove herself worthy. Determined to earn respect, Wren accepts an impossible task. Find and eliminate 3 dangerous yokai demons. With help from only her brother and a new ally who might be less than trustworthy, Wren will learn how far she'll go to claim her place at Death's side. This obviously is a fantasy. I think it's a YA fantasy, but regardless, I'm very, very excited to get to this one eventually. And for June, my book of the month pick was The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. I can't remember super well what the other options were in June, but I do remember that out of all of them, this one stuck out to me the most. I don't think there were any authors that I recognized or have read books from in the selections. And this is an adult thriller, and when I read the reviews, it seemed like people really, really enjoyed this one. Meg Williams, Maggie Littleton, Melody Wild. Different names for the same person, depending on the town, depending on the job. She's a con artist who erases herself to become whoever you need her to be. A college student, a life coach, a real estate agent, but nothing about her is real. She slides alongside you and tells you exactly what you want to hear, and by the time she's done, you've likely lost everything. Kat Roberts has been waiting 10 years for the woman who upended her life to return. And now that she has, Kat is determined to be the one to expose her. But as the two women grow closer, Kat's long-held assumptions begin to crumble, leaving Kat to wonder who Meg's true target is. I've lately been really into true crime surrounding con artists. I recently watched The Tinder Swindler and the Anna Delvey series, so this kind of caught my eye. I think it's like right on par with the kind of thing that I'm like really interested in right now. I don't know why con people interest me so much. I'm just fascinated. Can't explain it. But because of that, I think this book is going to be really, really entertaining and fun for me. And then my two add-ons for June are older Book of the Month picks. They're books that have been kind of just on my list for a long time. So if I find things to add on that are books that I've like been meaning to read, I tend to add them on because I have zero self-control. So the first one is Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman, and this was a November 2017 Book of the Month pick. For the Owens family, love is a curse that began in the 1600s when Maria Owens was accused of witchery for loving the wrong man. Hundreds of years later in New York City, at the cusp of the 60s, when the whole world is about to change, Susanna Owens knows that her 3 children are dangerously unique. Difficult Franny with skin as pale as milk and blood-red hair, shy and beautiful Jet, who can read other people's thoughts, and charismatic Vincent, who began looking for trouble on the day he could walk. From the start, Susanna sets down rules for her children. No walking in the moonlight, no red shoes, no wearing black, no cats, no crows, no candles, no books about magic. And most importantly, never ever fall in love. But her children will never adhere to rules. And all 3 are desperate to uncover who they really are. When they visit their Aunt Isabel in the small Massachusetts town where the Owens family has been blamed for everything that has ever gone wrong, they begin to understand the truth of who they are. The siblings discover there are family secrets to uncover, as well as secrets they have kept hidden from each other. When they move to 44 Greenwich Avenue in New York City, each begins a risky journey as they try to escape the family curse. Kind of reminds me of like Halloween Town. The mother who's like overprotective and doesn't want her children to like use their magic. But this sounds really good. I have been like sort of collecting witchy books again for fall. As you can tell, I'm just like very excited for fall, even though summer's just started. But I'm very, very excited to read this one. And I think this one is technically a prequel to Alice Hoffman's other book, which is called Practical Magic, I think, which I haven't read. But I've heard that they're kind of standalones. And kind of following the same theme, the next one I added on was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, and this was March 2021. Hidden in the depths of 18th century London, a secret apothecary shop caters to an unusual kind of clientele. Women across the city whisper of a mysterious figure named Nella, who sells well-disguised potions to use against oppressive men in their lives. Nella's dark world is no place for her newest patron, a precocious 12-year-old girl named Eliza Fanning, but their unexpected bond sparks a string of consequences that echoes through the centuries. 200 years later, aspiring historian Caroline Parswell discovers an aged apothecary vial in the River Thames, as she is newly grappling with the searing betrayal of her husband's infidelity. A curious research project is exactly the distraction Caroline needs. But when she discovers a link between the vial and London's long unsolved apothecary murders, Caroline's upended present soon collides with an explosive history, binding her fate to Nella's and Eliza's in a stunning twist that transcends the barrier of time. I don't know, it sounds really good, and I've heard pretty good things about it. I can't wait to read it. Again, it's kind of got the like dark witchy vibe I've been feeling. Next are pre-orders, and I think I talked about all 3 of these in my mid-year book freakout tag, but haven't hauled them yet. So here they are again. The first one is Siren Queen by Nevo. Nevo, again, wrote The Empress of Salt and Fortune and When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, the first 2 books I talked about. I also hauled this. This just came out. Obviously, it's a pre-order. No maids, no funny talking, no fainting flowers. Luli Wei is beautiful, talented, and desperate to be a star. Coming of age in pre-code Hollywood, she knows how dangerous the movie business is and how limited roles are for a Chinese-American girl from Hungarian Hill, but she doesn't care. She'd rather play a monster than a maid. But in Luli's world, the worst monsters in Hollywood are not the ones on screen. The studios want to own everything from her face to her name to the women she loves, and they run on a system of bargains made in blood and ancient magic, powered by the endless sacrifice of unlucky starlets like her. For those who do survive to earn their fame, success comes with a steep price. Luli is willing to do whatever it takes, even if that means becoming the monster herself. Come on. This sounds so good. I feel like I've said this in multiple videos, but I've only read about 100 pages of Nebo's writing and was like, I must own every book this author has ever written. So I feel like that says a lot, and the premise of this book sounds phenomenal. Next is a book that I pre-ordered and was very excited about, and then everyone hated it. But I'm still gonna read it because I pre-ordered it and I haven't read a book by this author yet. So maybe I'll start with the one that people actually like and then read this one. I don't know. That book, if you haven't already guessed, is The Book of Night by Holly Black. She spent half of her life working for glow-mists, magicians who manipulate shadows to peer into locked rooms, strangle people in their beds, or worse. Glow-mists guard their it's really hard to say that word. Glow-mists guard their secrets greedily, creating an underground economy of grimoires. And to rob their fellow magicians, they need Charlie Hall. Now she's trying to distance herself from past mistakes, but bartending at a local dive, she's still entirely too close to the corrupt underbelly of the Berkshires. Not to mention her sister Posey is desperate for magic, and Charlie's shadowless and possibly soulless boyfriend, Vince, has been hiding things from her. When a terrible figure from her past returns, Charlie descends into a maelstrom of murders and lies. Determined to survive, she's up against a cast of doppelgangers, mercurial billionaires, glow-mists, and people she loves best in the world, all trying to steal a secret that will give them a vast and terrible power. Can't say I'm tremendously excited about this one. This is probably the only book on here that I'm like, why do I own this? But I do, so I'm going to read it. The next one is When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. This book I have heard mixed things about. I've heard some people really like it, some people not really like it. I don't know how I will feel about it. This is supposed to be Kelly Barnhill's first adult novel, although I haven't read any of her other works. Anyway, Alex Green is a young girl in a world much like ours, except for its most dangerous seminal event, the mass dragoning of 1955, when hundreds of thousands of ordinary wives and mothers sprouted wings, scales, and talons, left a trail of fiery destruction in their paths, and took to the skies. Was it their choice? What will become of those left behind? Why did Alex's beloved Aunt Marla transform, but Alex's mother did not? No one knows. It's taboo to speak of it. Forced into silence, Alex nevertheless must face the consequences of this astonishing event. A mother more protective than ever, an absentee father, their upsetting insistence that her aunt never even existed, and watching her beloved cousin Beatrice become dangerously obsessed with the forbidden. It sounds cool. It sounds cool. We'll see how it goes. All right, so next are all of the rest of the books. They're not in any like specific order. I just made piles on the floor. So they're not in order of like genre or literally anything. I'm just gonna go through them. So the next book I hauled is Yoke by Mary H.K. Choi. I have not read a Mary H.K. Choi book yet, but I've heard really great things about her books and I want to get started with one, and this is the one I'm going to start with. People seem to love this book. It's a YA contemporary. Jane and June are nothing alike. June's 3 years older, a classic firstborn, know-it-all narc with a problematic finance job and an equally soulless apartment, according to Jane. Jane is an emotionally stunted, self-obsessed basket case who lives in squalor, has egregious taste in men, and needs to get to class and stop wasting mom and dad's money, if you ask June. Once thick as thieves, these sisters who moved from Seoul to San Antonio to New York together now don't want anything to do with each other. That is, until June gets cancer, and Jane becomes the only one who can help her. This sounds really sad, actually. This sounds sad, but probably really good. I love books that have a lot of like complicated family dynamics, so I'm sure I'll really like this one as well. Next is another Niveau book. I think that these are all the books Niveau has come out with so far. I could be wrong, but I think this is the last one to complete my collection, and that is The Chosen and the Beautiful. This book is gorgeous. I wonder if, I feel like the kind of aesthetic of this is a little bit like used and worn, and I bought this at a used bookstore, and I think that because it is a little bit used and worn, it's still in really good shape, but like the dust jacket's not quite perfect. It kind of like adds to the like beauty of this book. Anyway, let's talk about what it's about, shall we? Jordan Baker grows up in the most rarefied circles of 1920s American society. She has money, education, a killer golf handicap, and invitations to some of the most exclusive parties of the jazz age. She's also queer and Asian, a Vietnamese adoptee, treated as an exotic attraction by her peers, while the most important doors remain closed to her. But the world is full of wonders, infernal pacts and dazzling illusions, lost ghosts and elemental mysteries. In all paper is fire, and Jordan can burn the cut paper heart out of a man. She just has to learn how. I'm excited to read it. I'm excited about all of Nivo's books. Okay, next is a sequel to a series that I've started, and that is Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. This is the sequel to Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and it was supposed to be a duology, so I thought I'd be done after this one. But evidently another book is coming out, so I'll just never be done with series ever until the day I die. I've heard mixed things about this. It seems like a lot of people don't really like it, but I wanted to just like finish out this series so I could say I finished a series, and now that's not even gonna happen. So that's a bummer, but I do plan on reading this in July, hopefully. I don't want to read the summary of this one because it contains spoilers for the first book, but the first book follows Zelly, who lives in a world where magic is gone. And the night that magic disappeared, Zelly's mother, who practiced magic, was killed. And pretty much everyone in this world who practiced magic was killed because the new king believes magic is evil. So Zelly pretty much grows into a teenager in a world without magic. And basically, Zelly gets the chance to bring magic back. And she goes on this wild adventure with the help of a rogue princess to try to bring magic back to her world and to her people. I hope to get to this soon. You'll see what I think about it soon. I am kind of bummed that I have to wait on a third book and not finish this series, but I'll stop complaining about that now. Next is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I have Circe on my shelves, which I still haven't read, but people seem to like this one better, and so I think if I'm going to start, I'd like to start with this one. I think I've talked about this on my channel before, but Circe I started on vacation one time and like couldn't get into it and then put it down. I didn't read a lot of it. I probably read like 30-40 pages of it, and I do want to give it another chance for sure, but I'm sort of intimidated by it now, so I think I want to start with this one, and if I love this one, it'll definitely give me the motivation to pick Circe up. Achilles, the best of all the Greeks, son of the cruel sea goddess Thetis and the legendary king Peleus, is strong, swift, and beautiful, irresistible to all who meet him. Patroclus is an awkward young prince, exiled from his homeland after an act of shocking violence. Brought together by chance, they forge an inseparable bond, despite risking the gods' wrath. They are trained by the centaur Chiron in the arts of war and medicine, but when word comes that Helen of Sparta has been kidnapped, all of the heroes of Greece are called upon to lay siege to Troy in her name. Seduced by the promise of a glorious destiny, Achilles joins their cause, and torn between love and fear for his friend, Patroclus follows. Little do they know, the cruel fates will test them both as never before and demand a terrible sacrifice. This is obviously a Greek mythology retelling, so is Circe. I think that's kind of Madeline Miller's wheelhouse. I've heard great things about both books, but I do hope to get to this one, and obviously I plan to read this one before Circe. Next is one of Darian's favorite books. I also have this author's other work, or one of this author's other works, I'm not really sure, on my shelves. Haven't read it yet, but again, really want to read this book, and that is In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. In Thanopolis, those precious few gifted with magic are assigned undead spirits who guard them and closely control them. Ever since Rovin's father died to keep her from this fate, Rovin has hidden her magic. But when she accidentally reveals her powers to save a life, she's bound to one of the undead and thrust into a world of palace intrigue and deception. Desperate to regain her independence, Rovin still finds herself falling in love with two people she can't fully trust. Lydia, a beguiling and rebellious princess struggling against her destiny, and Avirlos, the handsome, powerful spirit with the ability to take control of Rovin, body and soul. Together they uncover a terrible secret that will destroy everyone in Thanopolis, both the living and the dead. To save them all, Rowan will have to start a rebellion in both the mortal world and the underworld, and find a way to trust the princess and the undead spirit battling for her heart, if she doesn't decide to betray them first. A.M. Strickland has like these premises that seem incredible, and I'm very excited to start reading their books. I just haven't yet. So many books, so little time. The next book was a gift from Sydney, so thank you so much, Sydney, and this is The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea by Maggie Takuta Hall. The pirate Florian, born Flora, has always done whatever it takes to survive, including sailing under false flag on the Dove as a marauder, thief, and worse. Lady Evelyn Hasegawa, a high-born imperial daughter, is on board as well, accompanied by her own casket. But Lady Evelyn's one-way voyage to an arranged marriage in the floating islands is interrupted when the captain and crew show their true colors and enslave their wealthy passengers. But Florian and Evelyn have lived their lives by the rules and whims of others. When they fall in love, they decide to take fate into their own hands, no matter the cost. Sydney absolutely loved this book, so I am very excited to check it out. Next is like a chunky fantasy that I know I'm gonna procrastinate reading for a very long time, so if you read this book and you loved it, leave a comment down below. Convince me to read it. And that is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. It sounds amazing. If I were to do a 5-star predictions video, which I actually am planning on doing, this book would be on it. This book will be on it. I think I'm going to absolutely love this. I just know I'm gonna procrastinate because it's long and high fantasy. Let's see. Yeah, it's over 500 pages. But when I get to it, I think I'm going to love it. So, the Omehi people have been fighting an unwinnable fight for 100,000 years. Their society has been built around war and only war. The lucky ones are born gifted. 1 in every 2,000 women has the power to call down dragons. 1 in every 100 men is able to magically transform himself into a bigger, stronger, faster killing machine. Everyone else is fodder, destined to fight and die in the endless war. Young, giftless Tao knows all of this, but he has a plan of escape. He's going to get himself injured, get out early, and settle down and live a simple life. Marriage, children, land. Until those closest to him are brutally murdered, and grief swiftly turns into anger. Fueled by thoughts of revenge, Tao dedicates himself to an unthinkable path. He'll become the greatest swordsman to ever live, a man willing to die 100,000 times for the chance to kill the 3 who betrayed him. Okay, this is giving me The Name of the Wind, and it's also giving me The Way of Kings. So I'm very excited about this. Those are both 5-star books, I should say that. I think I'm like going to absolutely love this once I pick it up. I just am in the middle of so many high fantasy series that I think it's going to have to wait a little bit. But again, if you've read this and loved it, hype me up, please. So I thought that I'd already hauled Mexican Gothic, and I talked about that when I was talking about the Hacienda, but I guess I haven't because it's in this giant pile of books. So this is a book of the month edition, but it is a book that I got at my local used bookstore. This, similar to The Hacienda, is a gothic novel that takes place in Mexico. After receiving a frantic letter from her newlywed cousin, Noemi Taboada heads to High Place, a distant house in the Mexican countryside, unsure of what she will find. Noemi is an unlikely rescuer. She's a glamorous debutante, more suited to cocktail parties than amateur sleuthing. But she's also tough, smart, and not afraid. Not of her cousin's new English husband, a stranger who is both menacing and alluring. Not of his father, the ancient patriarch who seems fascinated by Noemi. And not even the house itself, which begins to invade Noemi's dreams with visions of blood and doom. Noemi's only ally in this inhospitable place is the family's youngest son. But he too may be hiding something dark, for there are many secrets behind the walls of High Place, as Noemi discovers when she begins to unearth stories of violence and madness. Mesmerized by this terrifying yet seductive world, Noemi may soon find it impossible to save her cousin, or even escape this enigmatic house. This one and The Hacienda sound so similar, but I think it'll be really, really cool to read them both and compare them. I have very, very high hopes for both of them. Next is a horror book that I've heard so many incredible things about, and I'm so excited to read it. I feel like I'm just in this like dark book mood, and this is right up my alley right now. And that is Sundial by Catriona Ward. All Rob wanted was a normal life. She almost got it too. A husband, 2 kids, a nice house in the suburbs. But Rob fears for her oldest daughter, Callie, who collects tiny bones and whispers to imaginary friends. Rob sees a darkness in Callie, one that reminds her too much of the family she left behind. She decides to take Callie back to her childhood home, to Sundial, deep in the Mojave Desert. And there, she will have to make a terrible choice. Callie is worried about her mother. Rob has begun to look at her strangely and speaks of past secrets. Callie fears that only one of them will leave Sundial alive. I mean, it sounds fascinating. It sounds really scary. Horror books and horror movies where like the child is doing creepy things get me. They get me every time. I don't know why, but children talking to ghosts, children being shady, I'm all about it. It's like just the creepiest thing to me. So I'm very excited about this one. Yeah, I think the cover is also just stunning. So very excited. The next book is a book that I found in a local little free library. I check them out every once in a while, and I'll take things that I do really want to read. I do put a lot of books into little free libraries, so I feel like I participate in the system a pretty good amount. And that book is Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I need to get this sticker off of it. And I don't know where somebody bought this for $17. That seems extremely cheap for a pretty big hardcover, but good for them. This book has a blurb by Brandon Sanderson on the back, so that's a good sign. This has a post-it inside of it that says, like using a screwdriver to drive a nail, mousetrap to fix counter virus? Questionable. Very questionable. I don't know. All right, moving on. Ryland Grace is the sole survivor on a desperate last chance mission, and if he fails, humanity and Earth itself will perish. Except that right now, he doesn't know that. He can't even remember his own name, let alone the nature of his assignment or how to complete it. All he knows is that he's been asleep for a very, very long time, and he's just been awakened to find himself millions of miles from home with nothing but 2 corpses for company. His crewmate's dead, his memories fuzzily returning. Ryland realizes that an impossible task now confronts him. Hurtling through space on this tiny ship, it's up to him to puzzle out an impossible scientific mystery and conquer an extinction-level threat to our species. And with the clock ticking and the nearest human being light years away, he's got to do it all alone. Andy Weir wrote The Martian, which I've heard such good things about and have been wanting to read for a very, very long time. I actually own it because I bought it for Sean for, I want to say his birthday several years ago, and I've been meaning to pick it up. He read it and really loved it, and I've heard really good things about Hail Mary as well, so hopefully at some point I'll get to both of those. I seem to be hauling a lot of books by authors whose other books I've heard good things about and I haven't read, so I just need to like get started on some of these authors, but just means more great books to read, right? The next book is a YA fantasy that I've been meaning to read for so long, and that is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. Look at this. Look how beautiful this is. This is like a ribbon. We've got the flowers. There's blood. It looks amazing. And I see on the cover that it says Modern Fairy Tale, so that sounds really cool. Iris Hollow and her two older sisters are unquestionably strange. As children, they disappeared on a Scottish city street, only to return a month later with no memory of where they'd been or what happened to them. More troubling, their appearance began to change. Their blue eyes now black, their dark hair now white, and as they grew older, odd, eerie occurrences seemed to follow in their wake. People find them disturbingly intoxicating, unbearably beautiful, and inexplicably dangerous. Now, 17-year-old Iris is doing all she can to fit in and graduate high school on time, something her two famous, glamorous, globe-trotting older sisters, Gray and Vivi, never managed to do. But when Gray goes missing, leaving behind bizarre clues as to her whereabouts, Iris and Vivi are left to find her. But they aren't the only ones looking. As they brush against the supernatural, Iris quickly realizes that the story she's been told about their past is unraveling, and the world that returned them seemingly unharmed 10 years ago might just be calling them back again. This is kind of giving me Every Heart a Doorway. It sounds like they went somewhere and were like dumped back into the real world and now are gonna go back there, so I'm excited. It says wonderfully creepy and full of unnerving supernatural flourishes. We'll see. I'm excited about it. Next is another book I've been meaning to read forever, and I have read one book by this author, and that book is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. I read an arc of In a Garden Burning Gold, which Rory Power came out with this year, and I gave it 3 stars, but I am excited to read this one. I've heard this book is intensely creepy. I also think the cover of this one is amazingly beautiful, and I think that's part of the reason this has stayed on my radar for so long. It started slow. First, the teachers died one by one. Then the tox began to infect the students, turning their bodies strange and foreign. Now, cut off from the rest of the world and left to fend for themselves on their island home, the girls of Roxter School don't dare wander outside the surrounding fence to where the tox has made the woods wild and dangerous. But when Bryant goes missing, Hetty will do anything to find her, even if it means breaking quarantine and braving the horrors that lie beyond. And when she does, Hetty learns that there's more to their story, to their life at Raxter, than she could have ever thought true. It's also I think like a boarding school situation, which I tend to really love boarding school books, so pretty excited about this one. Next is another sequel to a series I've started. I am trying to read sequels. I haven't been reading a lot, but I'm trying to acquire and read them and get through some series, and that is Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. Again, I don't want to read the summary of this one. I think it'll spoil the first book. But the first book in the series is Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and Red Rising is a YA sci-fi that follows our main character, Darrow. Darrow is a red in this kind of hierarchical caste system society, and reds are basically at the bottom of the pack. They spend their lives working to make Mars habitable for humans, and they basically just do this hard manual labor day after day. But Darrow gets recruited into the secret society of people who understand that the Reds are being taken advantage of and exploited in this society, and Darrow's given the opportunity to infiltrate the Golds, which is the highest caste, and his goal is basically to take them down from the inside. I'm very excited to continue this series. I've heard great things about this sequel, and hopefully I get to it relatively soon. The next book is another beautiful cover book, and it is an adult fantasy, and that is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. This is another case of I have this author's other book sitting on my bookshelf and haven't read it yet, but I've heard such great things about this. I've been so hyped up for this book, and I did want to just add it to my collection, so I do get to it eventually. As the ward of the wealthy Mr. Locke, January Scholar feels little different from the artifacts that decorate his sprawling mansion, carefully maintained, largely ignored, and utterly out of place. But when she finds a strange book, one that tells a tale of secret doors, of love, adventure, and danger, for the first time, January realizes she can escape her story and sneak into someone else's. Sounds amazing. Sounds kind of similar to Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland. I don't know if that's true. Premise-wise, they seem quite similar, but this is a story that sounds very magical, very like whimsical, and I am super stoked to pick it up eventually. Next is a book that I feel like is sort of outside of my wheelhouse, but I was in a local independent bookstore in my town, and I just like was kind of curious about it. I saw the cover, read the summary, and was like, I think I want to try this one. It's definitely not my usual thing, but we'll see if I like it. And that is Outlawed by Anna North. I don't think I've ever read a Western before, so this is kind of new. In the year of our Lord, 1894, I became an outlaw. After a year of marriage and no pregnancy, in a town where barren women are routinely hanged as witches, 17-year-old Ada's survival depends on leaving behind everything she knows to join the Hole-in-the-Wall gang, a band of outlaws led by a preacher-turned-robber called the Kid. The Kid is determined to create a safe haven for outcast women, no matter the cost. When the gang hatches a plan that may get them killed, Ada must decide whether she's willing to risk her life for the possibility of a new kind of future for them all. So this is like a feminist Western. Yes, please. I think that sounds so cool. We'll see if I like it, but I feel like I'm going to. It seems like a book that I would really enjoy. Next is a book that my friend Cushy did a reading vlog about and did not end up liking at all, but I have heard some good things about it, and I'm not gonna lie, it was 10% off at Barnes & Noble, so I ended up just picking it up. And that is Iron Widow by Shiran J. Zhao. This is another case of absolutely amazing cover, like stunning. In Huaxia, the highest honor for a young girl is to be selected as a concubine pilot. Supporters paired up with male pilots to power up chrysalises, the giant transforming mechas that humanity relies on to battle the massive aliens that lurk beyond the Great Wall. But the honor often ends in death, and when 18-year-old Zeshin's sister is killed by an ace male pilot, Zeshin signs up to avenge her. The vengeance is swift, brutal, and unexpected, leaving Zeshin labeled as an Iron Widow, a much-feared kind of female pilot who can sacrifice boys to power up chrysalises instead of the other way around. To tame her unnerving yet invaluable mental strength, she is paired with Li Shimin, the strongest and most controversial male pilot in Huaxia. But now that Zeshin has had a taste of power, she will not cower so easily. She will miss no opportunity to leverage her and Shimin's combined might and infamy, and survive attempt after attempt on her life until she can figure out exactly why the pilot system relies so heavily on destroying girls' lives and dismantle it for good. I don't know, it sounds kind of badass and feminist, and I'm excited to read it. All right, the next 3 books are graphic novels. I went through a phase in the last month or two where I was like, I haven't read a lot of graphic novels, I want to read more. This was actually before I read Heartstopper Volume 1, which I absolutely adored, but I ended up picking up 3 graphic novels, and I'm excited to read them. I think they'll be really, really great fast-paced reads if I feel slumpy, or at the end of a month if I want to squeeze something in at the last minute. And the first one is Brazen by Penelope Buck-Yu. This one is just stunning. First of all, stunning. The artwork is stunning. Minimalist. Love it. And I believe this book is a nonfiction that tells the stories of various women who have changed the world. Oh my god, look how pretty this is. Okay. Throughout history and across the globe, one characteristic connects the daring women of Brazen. their indomitable spirit. Against overwhelming adversity, these remarkable women raised their voices and changed history. So, like I said, I think this is going to be amazing. I think I'm going to really enjoy this. I'll probably learn a lot, and I can't wait to get to it. Hopefully soon. I think this is the most stunning book that I own. Truly, like, for real. Next is a very chunky graphic novel, and that is On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. This one, I think the spine is incredibly beautiful, and I know it's like a sci-fi and a romance, I want to say. A restoration crew travels to the deepest reaches of space, rebuilding beautiful, broken structures to piece the past together. Two girls meet in boarding school and fall deeply in love, only to learn the pain of loss. And this one has, like, just a really beautiful color palette that I think is just aesthetically pleasing, and I'm very, very excited about it. And the last graphic novel is another nonfiction graphic novel, and that is The Complete Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This is a memoir. Persepolis is the story of Satrapi's unforgettable childhood and coming of age within a large and loving family in Tehran during the Islamic Revolution, of the contradictions between private and public life in a country plagued by political upheaval, of her high school years in Vienna facing the trials of adolescence far from her family, of her homecoming, both sweet and terrible, and finally of her self-imposed exile from her beloved homeland. It is a chronicle of a girlhood and adolescence at once outrageous and familiar, a young life entwined with the history of her country, yet filled with the universal trials and joys of growing up. I don't think I've ever read a memoir in graphic novel form. I don't think I've ever even heard of another memoir in graphic novel form. It sounds really cool, and I think this one's in black and white. But again, the art style's really, really cool. I think it'll be a great read. I've heard amazing things about this book. 2 more books. Stay with me. Next is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This is the first Grady Hendrix book I will read. I haven't read any others, obviously. And this one keeps coming up in like summer reads videos, like summer recommendations videos. And I was saving this for fall because it's like vampires, but apparently it's a great summer read. So bear that in mind. I don't know if I'll fit it in the summer, but I'm going to try to. Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her husband is a workaholic, her teenage kids have their own lives, her senile mother-in-law needs constant care, and she's always a step behind on her endless to-do list. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, a close-knit group of Charleston women united by their love of true crime. Then James Harris walks into her life during the summer of 1993. He makes her feel things she hasn't felt in years. But when children on the other side of town go missing, Patricia wonders if he's connected. Is he a Brad Pitt, a Bundy, or something much worse? Yeah, I mean, it sounds so good. I'm really, really excited to read it. It does, from the description, sound like it would be a fun summer read. I didn't know this was like true crimey. I've heard mixed things about this once again, but people seem to love Grady Hendrix. Maybe there's another book that like is more universally loved, but regardless, I'm excited to try Grady Hendrix. And I'm excited to dive further into horror. And last but not least, we have an adult fantasy book, and that is Black Sun by Rebecca Rowanhorse. In the holy city of Tova, 3 lives are converging during a solar eclipse, prescribed by the sun priest as an unbalancing of the world. Meanwhile, a ship launches from a distant city bound for Tova and set to arrive on the solstice. The captain of the ship, Ziala, is a disgraced teak, whose song can calm the waters around her as easily as it can warp a man's mind. Her ship carries 1 passenger, described as harmless. The passenger, Serapio, is a young man, blind, scarred, and cloaked in destiny. As Ziala well knows, when a man is described as harmless, he usually ends up being a villain. That summary is pretty vague, to be honest, but I've heard such amazing things about this book, so I am looking forward to it. That is all of the books, finally. If you're new to my channel, please consider liking this video and subscribing. I put out 1 bookish video every week, sometimes 2, if I can pull it off. If you're still here, thank you so much for being here. I always really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.